Never share this with anyone. What you are about to hear was not meant for the comfortable. It was not meant for the people who still need to be liked. It was meant for the one who is bleeding power through every door they refuse to close. Listen carefully. There is a moment in an empath's life, a single, silent moment, when something inside them dies. No one sees it. No one hears it. There is no announcement, no goodbye, no final argument, just a quiet shift behind the eyes. And from that day forward, they are never the same. The smile stays, the voice stays, the presence stays, but the access is gone. Carl Jung warned about this moment over 100 years ago. He called it the awakening of the shadow. The hour the soft one realizes their softness was being harvested. The hour the giver realizes they were being drained. The hour the kind one understands that kindness, without a spine, is just slow self-destruction, wearing a polite face. And tonight, you are going to witness exactly how the healed empath stops being nice. Not cruel, not cold, not bitter. Something far more dangerous. Aware. If you have ever felt used by people who claim to love you, if you have ever felt invisible in rooms you kept warm, if you have ever wondered why the people you helped the most became the ones who hurt you the deepest, do not skip a single second of this, because by the end of this video, the version of you that kept apologizing for existing will be dead, and what rises in its place will never bow again. Part 1. The invisible self-destruction of the empath you did not become nice because you were good. You became nice because it was safer. Somewhere, a long time ago, you learned a quiet equation. If you were soft, people stayed. If you were agreeable, people did not leave. If you absorbed the tension, the room did not explode. If you smiled through the pain, you were not punished for having needs. So you adapted. You did not choose kindness. Kindness was assigned to you. It was the role given to the child who could not afford to be difficult. The role given to the one who learned that love had conditions. The role given to the soul who confused being needed with being valued. And for years, you played that role so well, you forgot it was a role. You called it personality. You called it character. You called it your nature. But Carl Jung would say something colder, something truer. He would say that what you called your personality was simply the mask you built to survive a world that did not feel safe to your real self. That mask had a name: persona. And the persona of the empath is the most expensive mask a human being can wear. Because to keep it on, you have to slowly take off everything else: your opinions, your preferences, your boundaries, your anger, your no. Piece by piece, year by year, you remove the parts of yourself that made other people uncomfortable, until there was almost nothing left of you to be uncomfortable with. And here is the terrifying part. People did not love you for this. They consumed you for this. Listen, the world does not punish empaths for being kind. The world punishes empaths for being available. There is a difference. Kindness is a choice. Availability is a leak. And you have been leaking for years. Every time the phone rang and you answered, even when you had nothing left. Every time someone dumped their chaos on you, and you organized it like it was your job. Every time you smiled at someone who insulted you in subtle ways. Every time you said it's okay when it was not okay. Every time you forgave silently, just to keep the peace. You were not being noble. You were bleeding. And the people around you learned, very quickly, that you were a wound that gave gifts. So they kept reopening you. Not because they were monsters, but because you trained them. This is the part nobody wants to hear. You trained them. Every time you tolerated disrespect, you taught them disrespect was the price of admission. Every time you swallowed your truth, you taught them your truth did not matter. Every time you betrayed yourself to make them comfortable, you taught them your discomfort was acceptable currency. You were not the victim of cruel people. You were the architect of your own erasure. That is the first wound the healed empath must accept. Not the wound others gave them, but the wound they kept reopening to feel needed. Because that is the secret no one talks about. Being needed felt like being loved. And for an empath who never felt truly seen, being needed was the closest thing to home. So you stayed in friendships that drained you. You stayed in relationships that diminished you. You stayed in family roles that erased you. You stayed in work environments that exploited you. You stayed in conversations that consumed you. You stayed. And every time you stayed, a small part of you whispered the same desperate sentence. If I just give a little more, maybe this time they will finally see me. But they never did. Because they were not looking at you. They were looking at what you provided. The ear that always listened. The shoulder that always carried. The hand that always reached. The mouth that always reassured. The heart that always forgave. You were not a person to them. You were a function. And the day you realize that, something inside your chest cracks open and never fully closes again. Because you suddenly understand the meaning of every late-night silence, every unreturned call, every birthday they forgot, every time you needed them and they were too busy. Every moment your pain made them uncomfortable and they disappeared. You understand now, they were never attached to you. They were attached to access. And the moment that access threatened to close, they panicked. Not because they would lose you, but because they would lose what you gave them. That, right there, is the first death of the empath. The death of the illusion. And from this death, something begins to rise. Part 2. Awareness destroys the old identity. Awareness is not a gift. Awareness is a knife. It cuts through every comfortable lie you ever told yourself. It severs every relationship built on your silence. It dismantles every identity you wore to be loved. And the empath who becomes aware does not become loud, does not become aggressive, does not become bitter. The empath becomes quiet, a specific kind of quiet. The kind of quiet that scares people more than screaming ever could. Because when an empath stops explaining, stops fixing, stops chasing, stops apologizing, stops carrying, something terrifying happens to everyone around them. They are forced to feel themselves. For years, you were their emotional regulator. You softened their moods. You absorbed their stress. You translated their pain. You buffered their consequences. You held the weight they refused to hold themselves. And the moment you stop, they meet themselves for the first time. And they do not like what they find, so they react. Not with reflection, with manipulation. This is where the second death happens. You will notice patterns, sudden patterns, predictable patterns. The friend who suddenly calls you different, the partner who suddenly accuses you of changing, the family member who suddenly says you are not the person they used to know, the coworker who suddenly says you are acting strange. You did not change. You stopped performing. And to people who only knew the performance, the real you feels like a stranger. Worse, the real you feels like a threat. Because the real you cannot be controlled. The real you cannot be guilt-tripped. The real you cannot be bought back with crumbs. The real you cannot be summoned by tears that were never sincere. So they will test you. Quietly, cleverly, sometimes lovingly. They will say things designed to reactivate the old you. They will mention old memories. They will compliment the version of you that bled for them. They will say, I miss the old you. They will say you used to be so warm. They will say you've become cold. Cold. That word will follow you for the rest of your life. And here is what Carl Jung would tell you about that word. When a healing soul is called cold, it usually means they have stopped being a thermostat for everyone else's emotional weather. They have stopped heating rooms that refuse to warm them back. They have stopped being the fire that everyone took from, but no one ever fed. That is not coldness. That is conservation. That is the soul finally refusing to burn itself for the comfort of people who never even noticed the smoke. But you will feel guilt. Of course you will. Because guilt is the empath's native language. You will lie awake at night and wonder, am I being too harsh? Was I wrong to pull back? Maybe they did not mean it. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I am the problem. This is the moment most empaths fail. This is the moment they crawl back, apologize for boundaries they never even fully set, reopen doors they spent months closing, re-enter dynamics that almost destroyed them, and the cycle restarts. But the healed empath, the truly healed empath, does something different. They sit in the guilt. They do not run from it. They do not numb it. They do not act on it. They simply observe it. And in observing it, they see something Jung spent his life trying to teach. The guilt is not a moral signal. The guilt is a memory. It is the echo of every time you were punished for having needs. Every time you were shamed for saying no. Every time you were called selfish for protecting your peace. Every time love was withdrawn, the moment you stopped being convenient. The guilt is not telling you that you are wrong. The guilt is telling you that you are finally doing what the wounded version of you was never allowed to do. And that is the gateway to the shadow. Jung said the shadow is everything we were forbidden to be. For the empath, the shadow is enormous. It contains every emotion that was never allowed to live in the light. Your anger, your refusal, your rage, your selfishness, your indifference, your boundaries, your no, your enough. For decades, you treated these parts of yourself like enemies. You exiled them. You shamed them. You punished yourself every time they tried to surface. But Jung warned us, what we do not integrate controls us. The anger you suppressed became anxiety. The boundaries you swallowed became resentment. The truth you hid became depression. The rage you denied became exhaustion. The selfishness you refused became the burnout that nearly destroyed you. Your shadow was not your enemy. Your shadow was the part of you trying to save your life. And the day you stopped fighting it, the day you let your no exist without apology, the day you let your anger speak without translating it into politeness, the day you let your boundaries land without softening them with explanations, that is the day the old self dies. Not in fire, in silence. You will look in the mirror one morning and not recognize the eyes looking back, not because they are colder, but because they are finally honest. And you will realize something that breaks you and frees you at the same moment. What you called kindness was often avoidance. Avoidance of conflict, avoidance of rejection, avoidance of being misunderstood, avoidance of being disliked, avoidance of the unbearable possibility that if you showed your real self, no one would stay. You were not kind, you were afraid. And the moment you accept that, the moment you let that truth burn through every illusion you ever held about yourself, something extraordinary begins. The conscious empath is born. Part 3. The birth of the conscious empath. The conscious empath does not announce themselves. They do not post about their healing. They do not declare their boundaries to people who never respected them anyway. They do not give speeches about who they used to be. They simply become unavailable in ways that cannot be argued with. Their phone is slower to respond. Their presence is harder to summon. Their energy is harder to access. Their attention is no longer a public resource, and the people who used to drain them feel it immediately. Not as rejection, as gravity. There is a weight to a person who has stopped abandoning themselves, a density, a stillness. You can feel it in a room before they even speak. You can feel it in a message before they even reply. This is the empath who has come home to themselves. And here's what changes. They stop performing. They no longer enter rooms searching for approval. They no longer adjust their voice to make others comfortable. They no longer shrink so others can feel tall. They no longer dim so others can feel bright. They stop shrinking. Their opinions become clearer. Their no becomes shorter. Their yes becomes rarer. Their attention becomes precious. They stop fixing silence. When someone goes cold, they no longer chase. When someone withdraws, they no longer beg. When someone tests them, they no longer audition. The silence of others is no longer their emergency. They stop betraying themselves, not in big dramatic ways, in small, sacred ways. They no longer agree with statements they disagree with. They no longer laugh at jokes that wound them. They no longer stay in conversations that diminish them. They no longer accept invitations from people who only remember them when they need something. This is the philosophical climax of the entire transformation. Empathy, without self-definition, becomes self-erasure. Read that again, slowly. Empathy was never meant to be martyrdom. Compassion was never meant to be a cage. Sensitivity was never meant to be a sentence. The empath was never supposed to be the sacrificial figure who absorbs the world's pain so the world can keep functioning. That is not a gift. That is a wound being romanticized. The true purpose of the empath is not to feel everything for everyone. The true purpose of the empath is to feel deeply enough to know the difference between souls that nourish them and souls that drain them. That is discernment. That is the awakened gift. That is what every empath was actually born for. And once that gift activates, the question that runs your life completely changes. The old empath asked, "How can I be better for them?" The conscious empath asks, "Do they even meet me where I stand?" That single question rearranges every relationship in your life. Friendships will fall away, some quietly, some loudly. Some will rage at you for finally having a spine. Some will guilt you for finally having a self. Some will rewrite the entire history of your relationship to make you the villain for refusing to be their emotional servant any longer. Let them. Their narrative is none of your business anymore. Family dynamics will shift. Roles you played for decades will collapse. The peacekeeper will go silent. The fixer will fold their hands. The emotional translator will let people speak for themselves for once. And everyone will feel the absence of the labor they never even knew you were doing. Let them feel it. That absence is their education. Romantic patterns will break. You will no longer be drawn to the unavailable, the inconsistent, the chaotic, the wounded. Not because you stopped loving people, but because you finally started loving yourself enough to stop calling pain familiar and confusing it with home. You will sit in solitude, long stretches of it. And for the first time in your life, the solitude will not feel like loneliness. It will feel like sovereignty. It will feel like the room you were never allowed to have inside your own life. You will become selective about everything. The voices you let into your ears, the conversations you let into your mind, the people you let into your peace, the energies you let into your body. You will notice that your nervous system, which used to vibrate with everyone else's chaos, finally has its own rhythm, your own pulse, your own quiet. That quiet is power. That quiet is the home Jung said every soul is searching for. The reunion with the self with a capital S. The integration of all the parts of you that the world tried to splinter. You are no longer the empath who absorbs. You are the empath who chooses. You are no longer the empath who survives. You are the empath who decides. You are no longer the empath who bleeds for connection. You are the empath who only opens for connection that does not bleed you. And here is the final truth. The truth Jung built his entire life's work around. You are never losing people. You are losing the roles that required you to disappear. The friend who left when you stopped being available was never your friend. They were a beneficiary of your self-abandonment. The partner who turned cold when you stopped chasing was never your partner. They were a tenant in a house you were paying for emotionally. The family member who called you cold when you stopped explaining yourself was never seeing you. They were seeing the function you performed for them. You did not lose love. You lost the counterfeits that were standing in love's place. And in losing them, you finally made room for something real. Real connection, real reciprocity, real intimacy, real love that does not require you to be smaller than you are. The healed empath does not become cruel. The healed empath becomes accurate. They see clearly. They love selectively. They give intentionally. They speak honestly. They walk away calmly. They stay only where they are truly met. They are not cold. They are not bitter. They are not closed. They are awake. And an awake empath is the rarest force in this world, because they have walked through the fire of being used, the silence of being forgotten, the betrayal of being misunderstood, and the agony of being abandoned by people who claimed to love them, and they did not become hard. They became whole. That is the secret Carl Jung tried to leave behind for souls like you. The point of the journey was never to stop feeling. The point was to stop bleeding. The point of awakening was never to become unloving. The point was to finally include yourself in the love you so freely gave. So tonight, as you sit with this truth, understand something. The version of you that kept apologizing for existing is gone. The version of you that confused being needed with being loved is gone. The version of you that kept doors open for people who only walk through them to take is gone. What remains is sacred. What remains is sovereign. What remains is you, the real you, without the mask, without the persona, without the performance. And from this day forward, your kindness will mean something again, because it will be a choice, not a survival reflex. Your love will mean something again, because it will be given, not extracted. Your presence will mean something again, because it will be earned, not assumed. You are not becoming colder. You are becoming clearer. And clarity, as Jung knew, is the highest form of love a soul can give itself. The empath stops being nice, not because the world made them hard, but because they finally became real. If this video reached the part of you that has been silent for too long, leave one word in the comments: awake. That single word is your declaration, your signature, your line in the sand. It tells the universe, and it tells the deepest part of yourself, that the old version is no longer welcome here. If you want to walk further into this work, subscribe and stay close. There is a quiet army of conscious empaths gathering here, the 0.01% who chose awareness over approval, the ones who stopped bleeding for people who would not even bandage them. You belong with them now. You always did. You just had to die to the version of yourself that did not know it yet. Welcome home.